Hi, everybody. This is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. And today I'm sitting down to take a look at our spring equinox, which is today, as well as the full moon in Libra, which is happening simultaneously. So it's a pretty big event from the standpoint of astrology. We always pay attention to spring equinoxes. We always pay attention to full moons when they occur at the exact same time. It's kind of interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and put a chart up on the screen and show you what it looks like, and then tell you a few things about this particular equinox and full moon. All right, so you should be able to see, yep, here it is. So let's take a look at the moment of the equinox and the full moon. So you can see that it's coming through right now. You see the sun is at about 29 degrees Pisces, right here. And as soon as it enters into Aries, that's officially our spring equinox moment. So let's see what that looks like. We're going to move this forward a couple hours. And right as the sun is setting here on the East Coast tonight, a little before 7 o'clock, you'll see that the moon, or the sun, excuse me, moves into the sign of Aries. So that's our spring equinox moment. But what's really unique about this is, of course, that if you look, there's the moon about ready to also jump into Libra and will immediately oppose the sun and make the full moon. So I'll show you what that looks like. Move it forward a few more hours, and you can see that on the East Coast is actually quite literally the full moon is rising as the spring equinox moment. The sun entering Aries is happening as the sun is setting. So it's really pretty profound. There you can see, here's the full moon. So there's the full moon in Libra happening this evening, right around 9:30 or so East Coast time. And so you have both events happening simultaneously today. So a lot of people are asking the question, you know, is this a big deal? Should we pay attention to this or not? You know, what do you think? I have to say that I find it very interesting that at the same time this is happening, first of all, it seems like an auspicious equinox, because look at Venus getting together with Jupiter in a sextile. You have the great benefics, the bestowers of blessings, getting together at the same time of the equinox. That's pretty profound. So before I dive into exactly what that means, though, let's talk about the sun and the meaning of the sun in Aries, because there's a lot that can be said about just that alone. So I wrote a horoscope today as well, and you could read that to get more information about the, about the meaning of the sun in Aries. But here's some of the highlights. So obviously, the sun's entrance into Aries heralds zodiacal spring, a new set of 3 signs, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, that define zodiacal spring. And this moves us into the yang half of the solar year from the standpoint of the zodiac's symbolic orientation in the northern hemisphere. All the way until the fall equinox, the days are now going to be longer than they are shorter, all the way until the sun enters Libra. If you think about the basic meaning of the sun in Aries that you're used to hearing, it all has to do with the association that Aries has with this moment in the solar year on an archetypal or symbolic level. Aries is associated with the youth of spring, with energy, with upward and outward movement, with virility, fire, light, heat, and the moment of the scales of the solar year tipping, so to speak, or of the light taking over from out of the darkness of the yin half of the year and the winter season. Again, if you think about everything you've ever heard about Aries, from bravery and courage to the warrior and competition and dominance and even self-centeredness, all of these different qualities that we may ascribe to Aries on a psychological level or any other kind of symbolic level correspond very simply to the moment where the scales tip and lightness takes over and begins to dominate. So it's a moment, a tipping point that is associated with dominance of yang. Aries is also an initiating sign. Sometimes we call it a tropical sign or a cardinal sign. The word tropical, the traditional name for a cardinal sign, comes from the word tropos, which means to turn. So Aries energy is almost always associated with energy that moves swiftly, as though turning and initiating a takeover, usually asserting something. Of course, this makes sense. It is the domicile of Mars, the warrior. Accordingly, the spring equinox of this equinox moment, the 0 point of Aries, has also long been the starting point of the tropical zodiac, which, if if you understand the tropical zodiac, first and foremost, it is a mathematical circle in the sky divided into 12 portions of 30 degrees each, according to the sun's movement through the ecliptic from our perspective. So people always ask me, why start with Aries? Why does the zodiac start with Aries? The basic reason for this is that ancient astrology is oriented in relation to the sun and light as symbols of enlightenment, knowledge, clarity, illumination, progress or development of the soul toward its true nature from out of the entanglement with materiality. And this is the time of year where light takes over and begins its dominance. This is the turning point of the light. Now, some people could say, what about the winter solstice? Doesn't the light start to return at the winter solstice? Certainly you have similar symbolism employed, for example, in the Christian tradition with Christ being born at the winter solstice. So I don't want to dismiss it, but what's unique about ancient astrology, horoscopic astrology, birth chart astrology, we might say, is that the system is oriented not only towards light, but towards the first appearance of light. With the ascending sign in a birth chart, for example, defining the entire chart, orienting the whole chart, what we're really saying is that the place where planets and stars first appear from below the horizon in the womb of the earth, so to speak, and they make their appearance and they shine on us, we see them for the first time, that's the orientation of the birth chart. Well, on a similar level, we know that Aries is the time of year where the yang is making its first appearance. It is the yang is taking over. The yin has been dominant, right? So Capricorn, in other words, is at a time where yin is most dominant. So that's not the time to really, it's maybe a seeding period, but it's not really the birth moment. A moment of first appearance where something first appears, like a little plant sprouting up in the spring. That is has the same kind of archetypal meaning as planets rising or appearing in the east and the defining place of the ascendant. However, I will say that that does not mean that the meanings of the sign of Aries are exactly the same as the first house. There are some interesting associations to be made, but the rationale of the first house and all of the houses are not on a one-to-one correspondence with the signs Aries through Pisces. That is not how ancient astrologers organize the rationale at any rate. So now we should remember, some people after hearing this will immediately wonder about the orientation of the circle. It's northern hemisphere centric. Does that mean I need to flip it or do something different because I'm in the southern hemisphere? And the answer is no. The language is symbolic. And although the circle is oriented from a specific place on Earth, the orientation is archetypal. And therefore, the language of the system of astrology is valid from any place on the planet, including the southern hemisphere. Just think, for example, the fact that you could have a lot of planets in Aries while being born during the winter, and that might still give you a lot of qualities that were spring-like. The exact time of year that you're born is not important in some causal sense, at least not for our language. So you can use it anywhere. Okay, now let's talk about this equinox in particular. It has to be meaningful that this is happening at a full moon while Venus and Jupiter are getting together, doesn't it? Doesn't it have to mean something, right? Well, one hint here comes from not only is there the benefics are getting together and the moon is full as this is happening, but we should pay special attention to the dignity change that happens when the sun moves into Aries. When the sun moves into Aries, it becomes exalted. So from exaltation, we get a very powerful understanding of the sun's normal qualities. Traditionally, all fire signs, by the way, were called royal. And the element of fire in particular, which Aries is a fire sign, the element of fire occupied the highest of the elemental spheres. It was the most subtle, and it was closest to the planets and stars in nature. So in a Platonic sense, the sun in Aries is like a philosopher king. It's subtle, light, intelligent, wise, clarifying, and action-oriented all at once. A philosopher queen, you could say, too. It's like a powerful leader who is wise but also kind, subtle but also strong. A wise leader knows what actions to take not only to get things done, but how to win people to the cause in the process. How to remind people of what the higher cause is. So a noble king, an action-oriented but noble, wise kind of leadership or guidance that comes from the sun in Aries. Now think about that, and then think about the moon simultaneously, rising full in the sign of the scales, Libra, where we're also presented with an image of wise judgment or discernment, the need to weigh and balance options, to carefully choose, to the need for fairness, and always to consider the need for both beauty and truth and goodness all together. Venus in Libra is both justice, truth, beauty, and goodness all combined, you might say. So how to put all of that together? And especially with this feeling of there being such abundance coming through with Venus and Jupiter getting into a sextile. So I consulted the I Ching this morning, as I love to do, and this great teaching came through. So the second hexagram of the I Ching, and the I Ching, by the way, is the oldest of the Chinese classics that eventually became used as a kind of an oracular device. The 42nd hexagram is called Increase, and it depicts the blessings of heaven, or teachers or gurus or sages or kings or anyone with power or authority raining down generously on those below them. And the basic teaching of hexagram 42 is that the natural position of heaven, divinity, is to supply creation with the facility it needs to achieve its desires. So on one level, it's an instruction that if you have a lot, give a lot. But it's also a good omen, because it generally indicates that heaven is sending blessings. Heaven is pouring down something that will become a boon or provide us with something that we need. And it will push us into action right now. So the basic teaching of the hexagram 42, again, is that the natural position of heaven is to supply creation with the facility it needs to achieve its desires. Think about it. In your life, isn't it true that in a certain sense, I know it's not always the case, but if you're hungry, you get some food. If you're, if you're desiring to be intimate with someone, you end up finding a way of being intimate with someone. In other words, creation has a way of naturally providing us with facility to achieve satisfaction of our urges or desires. So heaven's constantly just pouring down blessings. Now, I know it's a little tooth and nail in the material world, like I'm not saying it's rosy, but everything is provided with what it wants or needs here. Basically, that's the idea of this hexagram, that heaven's kind of just raining down like rain and proliferating life. And in a general sense, life satisfies itself, its desires, like that. But there's a deeper teaching here, which again sometimes has to do with generosity and giving things to people who are in need, or receiving something from someone on high. And that famous verse, ask and you shall receive, knock and the door will be opened. That's the kind of energy of the moment. It has a feeling of grandness, of royalty, and of something bigger bestowing a blessing from on high. That's the feeling of the moment. But the first two lines of hexagram 42 offer a few really important lessons. The first lesson is that given that heaven is always dispensing its blessings and providing us with the facility to achieve our desires, we should be absolutely sure that we use whatever is given to us in service to a higher cause or to divinity itself, especially when some unexpected windfall or blessing comes to us. The auspiciousness, in other words, of receiving something great is actually the opportunity that we're being given to make a great offering in return. That's actually the secret of happiness. And that's what the 42nd hexagram is teaching us. The second lesson of these first two lines of hexagram 42 has to do with the trouble that we might attract if we do not have a higher cause or source to serve when given greater facility. So if I'm empowered and I don't have people I can give to, or I don't have a higher sense of divinity that I'm serving, I'm going to attract problems. Eventually we attract a great fall. So we attract that trouble. And that's really the second lesson and part of the first two lines. So we need the recognition of where all blessings come from and some sense of being in service to something higher, especially when good things rain down upon us, especially when fortune comes our way. We need to be able to give back in some way. And without this recognition, we're not likely also to fully appreciate heaven or the gift giver or divinity. And there is responsibility, in other words, that comes with being the recipient of some act of benevolence or grace. Now, when these two lines change, which they were both changing in today's reading, hexagram 59 appears in its place and that hexagram is called dispersion. And this hexagram depicts wind moving over water, dispersing the water in all different directions. And the hexagram tells the story of a king who saw that after a joyous gathering or after a victory, the people's energy would generally scatter in all directions and lose focus. This is pretty common. I see this happen all the time. With my little daughter, for example, if we go out and we do something fun, we go to the park, and there's like a lot of like lively, fun, celebratory energy. If I do that too late at night, it's very hard for her to wind down and go to bed and get focused to do tasks. So similarly, this king in hexagram 59 notices that after celebration, there is dispersion of focus. After joy and after like that, there's dispersion. Similarly, even energetically, when people make love, right? There's dispersion that occurs of your energy afterwards. You maybe lose focus, have a hard time. It's not easy to be like super on it right away, right? Because you're kind of laying in the glow. So the king notices that his people are scattering in all directions after a great blessing comes. And because he notices, hey, you're losing focus, you're getting too high on the good times, he makes a decision to immediately leave the city and journey to a distant temple in order to offer something up to the ancestors and to the gods. And his choice to do that at just that moment, his immediate absence after the celebratory moment, has the effect of helping all of the people to quickly retain a concern for safety and order, because the king's gone. Oh, we have to pay attention, we have to get back on it. You can't just bask in the glow and lose everything. It's not to say that there's no relaxation or something like that. It's not to be a task, some kind of cruel taskmaster. But if you notice that people are getting a little too high, then it's a way of redirecting focus and attention back to something transcendent. So after something good comes, you give thanks. After something good comes, you retain focus. After something good comes, you give back, right? So he goes right away to the ancestral temple and makes an offering to the gods. And his immediate concern after the celebration with these principles will help other people in the kingdom. Like, oh, the king's not here. It brings them back to the need for safety and order. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to organize. We have to be a little bit on guard. So a little amplifies the anxiety just a bit to help them get out of that, the haze, the high time or whatever. And it also helps them return to their spiritual center, because what is he doing and where is he aiming himself? He solemnly goes off to do that, setting the example for other people. Yes, there's good times, but don't let them take you over. Retain focus on what matters. So similarly, though this equinox has an auspicious aura of goodness around it, Venus and Jupiter are getting together in a sextile, the light of spring is returning, the full moon of Libra is telling us to be wise, to be discerning, to remember the higher good. Remember what happens in the sign of Libra? The sun moves into its fall. And when the sun moves into the sign of Libra, it enters its fall. The king leaves, the king departs. The good times, the light will eventually be gone. How are we going to use this energy? No, we can't lose focus. You can't lose yourself in the high of the moment. If you've been given a gift, what is it? It's an opportunity to give back to something bigger. If you've been given some facility in life, me or anyone, how can we share with others in a way that might lift each other up? These questions we ask ourselves right now are very important, because, of course, what can happen is we can lose focus, scatter our energy in too many different directions at once, get high, not recognize the gift, the gift giver, and where everything is coming from ultimately and what we're really in service to. The time is short, and the light will eventually leave again. And there's a teaching for us there in the full moon in Libra, the sign of the fall equinox, co-present with us right now. So that's what I've got for you today. I hope that this was good things to consider at the moment of the spring equinox. Here's the prayer for the day. We thank you for every blessing and excitement, for the fullness of the life that you give us endlessly. May we come to recognize the proper use of what we are given, and may you always be our prayerful remembrance.